What a beautiful day to be outside, right? We just got about a foot of snow last night, and it is absolutely gorgeous out here. But is it really that fun to work in? Recently, I did a poll asking you what you found to be the most challenging shooting environments, and the majority of you said this, that it was working in the cold. And so in this video, I'm going to walk you through a few useful tips that'll help you dealing with extreme cold conditions. So when you find yourself working in extreme cold conditions, there's going to be a lot of things that start to build up against you. Your batteries just aren't going to last as long, and the last thing you want to do is run out of power. Condensation can build up on both your lenses and your camera sensor, which can cause permanent damage to your gear. Your LCD screen might start to freeze up and drag, which is going to make it really impossible to see what it is that you're actually capturing. And then I guess there's the obvious, which is your hands are going to start to freeze. Back in 2018, I shot a film called Tigerland that was directed by Oscar-winning Ross Kaufman. And the film follows two conservationists who are looking to save the tigers, both in India and in Far East Russia. So while we were filming in Russia, we did the majority of our work in February, and the temperatures were dropping as low as -35, -40 degrees Celsius. So it was extremely cold and harsh conditions. And so a lot of the challenges that we're talking about in this video, we dealt with directly on that film. The first tip that I want to offer up is bring a tarp, and in fact, bring one that's got some color to it. So the tarp's going to do a few different things. The first thing that you can do is just spread it out, and it's going to give you a dry, safe place to store your gear, to keep things out of the snow. But the other thing that's going to do is it's going to help you when you start to wrap up your gear to make sure that you're not leaving anything behind. And that's where I like to have something that's a little bit more brightly colored, like this one is red. And so I really find that being able to store all of your gear on top of this tarp is both going to keep it safe and also keep it found. The next thing we're going to look at, and it's probably the one that most people go to first, which is how do I keep my batteries from dying so fast in the field? Because cold weather is going to have some serious impacts on the lifespan of your battery. And so you want to make sure that you're not running out of power when you're in the field. So the first thing that you should do is obviously bring way more batteries than you think you're going to need, because it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. The next thing that you would do is, if you're renting your gear from a rental house, make sure that you're getting batteries that are newer, because the lifespan of these is going to drop significantly faster if these are older cells and they just won't hold their charge as long. So try to work with your rental house to have them give you their newest and freshest batteries that they have in stock. The next thing you should do is just always carry one of these at least in your jacket pocket, because being inside of your coat pocket, your body warmth is going to keep it warm, and you also just always have a fresh battery ready to swap. And so always having one on you is going to ensure that you always have a fully charged, ready to go battery. And the last thing that you can do is keep all of your batteries inside of a cooler, right? Because this cooler will not only keep things nice and cool when it's warm outside, but it's also going to keep them nice and warm when it's cold outside. And so if you store all of your batteries inside of one of these, and you can even drop in a few hand warmers if your temperatures are really dropping, then this cooler is going to keep your batteries nice and warm and also make sure that they fully hold their charge throughout the day. The next tip is about dealing with condensation. So basically what happens is, in extremely cold conditions, the humidity level is going to be really low. And anytime that you make a shift from one temperature to another, even if to you it feels insignificant, the humidity level is going to change. And so that is going to instantaneously fog up your lens. And if you're in a situation where you're doing a lens change in that environment, it's also going to fog up your camera sensor. And this can be a really bad thing to have happen. And so there's a few things that you can do to mitigate the buildup of condensation on your camera. So the first thing that I would suggest is the way that you store your lenses. And what I like to do is, inside of my case, is I have individually wrapped all of my lenses inside of a Ziploc bag. And so this will obviously help protect them as you start to get some snow in the case. But what this is going to do is, when you have a humidity shift, the condensation is going to build up on the outside of these bags and not on the inside of the lens. And so that's really going to help make it a lot easier to get back to shooting, to allow that acclimatization to happen. So taking this Ziploc bag idea one step further is we've got our lenses put into small Ziploc bags inside the case, but we can also put our camera inside a extra large Ziploc bag. And let me just show you what that looks like. So when we were on Tigerland, we brought a bunch of these, right? And these are just those extra large Ziploc bags, some of them even bigger, that you can use for vacuum sealing, blankets and pillows and things like that. And anytime that we were making a transition from one temperature to another, going from inside to outside, then that would help protect both the camera and the lens that's on it from the buildup of condensation and give it some time to acclimate. And when it comes to acclimating, it's just something that you're going to have to be patient with. There's really no way to rush that. And so what we would do is, again, I would have the camera and the lenses stored inside of their Ziploc bags. If we were going from filming outside to then going into a warm cabin to do some filming on the inside, then basically what I would do is I would take all of my Ziploc bagged items, I would move them from outside to inside, set them there, open the case, and just leave the camera sealed inside of that bag and just wait. And it's just going to take a little bit of time. You know, it can take anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on the temperature change, and just let everything acclimate to the new environment. Let the condensation build up on the outside of the bags so it's not affecting your gear. And then once that's done, then you can take everything out and get to work. But it is something that you're going to have to just budget time for. You know, it really is amazing to kind of wrap your head around how quickly things can build up condensation in what feels like a no-shift environment. You know, we would be outside all day filming in, environments like this, and our car had been parked on the side of the road the entire time. You know, it's not on, there's no heat. It's as cold inside the car as it is outside. But what would happen is the second that we would take that gear and one of us would get inside the car and close the door, instantaneously everything would fog up, because just that subtle shift of containing the moisture and the warmth from our bodies changed both the humidity level and the temperature just enough to fog everything up. And so it's going to happen, and it's going to happen all the time. We sometimes might feel like we want to just get moving, right? And we've got some fog that's built up on our lens. So let's just grab our lens wipe, clean the lens, and get going. Now, that's not going to do anything. First thing that it's going to do is just going to smudge all of that moisture on the lens, and then it's going to recondensate. And so instead of wasting your time and smearing your lens that you're going to have to clean later, just wait. If there is some condensation that builds up on your lens, as it acclimates, as long as you don't smear it, it's just going to evaporate and you're not going to see it on the lens. And so really in this situation, patience is key. If you've done any filming in cold weather, even something just at or below freezing, you've probably noticed that you have some issues with your LCD screens, right? Your onboard monitors, your EVFs, you start to get some streaking, some dragging, some delays in that. Because basically what's happening is your LCD or liquid crystal display, the liquid inside of that is starting to freeze. And so it just, drags that display out. And this is both incredibly frustrating because you can't see what it is that you're getting. And at least for me, it starts to play tricks with my brain to think, is this what I'm recording? Thankfully, no, it's not. It's just what the display is showing you. But it's definitely a little unnerving. And so here's an idea of how to deal with that. So if you are going to be out in the cold, I would assume that you're probably going to be bringing along some hand warmers, right? And these things are great, not only for keeping your hands warm, but also for things like we said, putting inside of this cooler to keep our batteries warm. But you can also use these to mitigate the cold issues that happen with your LCD screens. And so what I'll do is I'll take one of these, get it nice and warm, and I'll just bongo tie it to my EVF or to the back of my onboard monitor. And having that heat and that warmth on the back of your screen is going to keep the liquid nice and warm, and you're not going to have those streaking issues. And, these things last for a pretty long time. Obviously, they're going to fade a little bit faster if they're just out in the open as opposed to inside of your pocket. So, bring along a bunch of these, but these things are really going to save you and make sure that you can keep shooting and keep seeing what you're shooting regardless of the temperature. The next tip revolves around, what do you do about your camera? So if you're in a situation where your camera is not just sitting on a tripod and collecting snow and getting incredibly cold, And you need to have this thing up on your shoulder. You're doing some run and gun verite. You need access to all of your buttons and focus and things like that. And so when I was shooting Tigerland, I was operating like this. I didn't have the camera covered at all, and the camera did incredibly well. But I would also say is that while we were shooting that film, we didn't have a lot of snowfall. If you're going to be going out, if you're not going to have your camera covered 100% of the time, there's a few things that you should make sure you bring. Just make sure you've got some rags. So you can always just wipe the camera off, periodically to keep it nice and dry, and make sure that that moisture is not going to have any effect on the camera. So I would say one of the reasons that I absolutely love working with Canon cameras is they are built like a tank. I mean, I have run these things through every imaginable environment. But at the end of the day, you also want to make sure that you're protecting your gear and protecting your investment. So do what you can to keep these things nice and dry. But in a situation like this, where the snow is coming down relatively hard, then you want to make sure that you're going to keep your camera at least dry, if not warm. Because trust me, the moisture is going to have a far greater impact on it than the cold will. And so there's a few things that you can do. Depending on the temperatures, if it's not that cold outside, if it's just around freezing, then if it's snowing a lot, you can just cover it with a rain cover or bring an umbrella. Just making sure that you're keeping some of that moisture off the camera. But if it's extremely cold, if it is dropping down into the negative digits, then you might want to do something to protect your camera a little bit more. And so in that situation, I would very much consider looking at something like this. So this is a Polar Pro cover from Portabrace, and they make these to be able to fit on any and every type of camera available. And these things are amazing, right? They are insulated, waterproof camera covers that are going to not only protect it from the snow on the outside, but also insulate it to keep it nice and warm on the inside. So, what's nice about this is the entire camera is covered. I've got a slot for my EVF. I can add extensions onto the front of this depending on how long my lens is. But what's also nice about them is on the inside, they have little mesh pockets that you can use to store, once again, hand warmers. So shove some hand warmers in there and your camera is going to be nice and toasty. The last tip I'm going to offer up has less to do with the equipment and more to do with yourself. And that is, make sure that you layer up. Now, if you spend a lot of time in the cold, you're going to know that this is incredibly obvious. But I think oftentimes what we think about is it's going to be incredibly cold outside, so let's wear as many clothes as possible. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes if you are just standing around, you are always going to be cold regardless of how much you're wearing. But sometimes you may start to be a little bit more active, your body temperature is going to come up, and you're going to start sweating on the inside. And if you're just wearing one massive heavy coat and no way to shed that layer down, then you really don't have any way to deal with that. And so make sure that you're layering up. Like right now, I have on a long sleeve shirt, I have on a sweatshirt, I have on my bib, and I have on this coat. And what's really nice about this is if I'm doing something where I'm incredibly active, if I'm hiking, if I'm snowshoeing, if I'm chasing after somebody, then I can just shed this layer off. But then as I slow down, as my body temperature comes back down, I want to make sure that I can pop this right back on and warm up pretty quickly. And so dealing with cold has a lot of being able to kind of balance and compensate what your body temperature is. When it comes to your hands, I would have a thin liner that you can wear inside of some larger gloves. For one, working with heavy gloves and operating a camera is sometimes really difficult. And so I found myself most of the time just working with thin liners. And then, of course, I always had my gloves on the ready that when the camera went down, I could pop my hands into those thicker gloves and warm them up pretty quick. It was amazing. One of the first days that we were in Russia on Tigerland, we were following Pavel, basically tracking tigers. And we rode the snowmobile out. It was incredibly cold. The wind's blasting us in the face. I could not have enough layers on. But then we stopped. Pavel got off the snowmobile and we started hiking straight out into the woods to track a tiger. And it was not that long into that hike that I was burning up on the inside. I immediately stripped all of this off. It's minus 35 degrees outside, and I am effectively wearing a long sleeve t-shirt and a hat and a scarf. So we set back out again. We are hiking, we're hiking, we're hiking. I'm staying nice and warm. And then the second we get back to that snowmobile, I throw all those clothes back on. And it was such an incredible realization to me that it can be negative 35 degrees Celsius outside, and I'm walking around in a long sleeve shirt. But you really need to make sure that you're able to balance your body temperature so that you're not either overheating or freezing. All right, well, that sums up the tips that I have for you for shooting in extreme cold. I hope you found them helpful. You know, I will have to say that while it's not the same as shooting on a nice, warm, breezy summer day, working in extreme cold and working in the snow can be an incredible experience. It's been some of the best experiences that I've had in my career. And so I urge you to get out there, find a project that takes you to beautiful environments like this, and push yourself. You know, as long as that you are prepared and you've looked at the various things that you might run into and you're prepared for those, filming an environment like this can be and should be just as easy and just as fun as a beautiful summer day. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.